think at this moment in time, if I had to predict anyone to be in that 11th spot at the end of the season, it's Aberdeen. I don't think Aberdeen, like you say, have been a great side throughout the season, but I think arguably they've saved their worst period to maybe the last sort of 6 or 7, 8 weeks.
We'll see before we get into the football. A little birdie told me that you two went to primary school together.
We did,
yeah. True?
Yeah, that's correct.
Did you get on? Were you pals?
Best pals.
Were you actually?
Yeah.
Who was better at football?
Scotty.
Oh, no.
Who's better at football now?
Well, me, I'm the one I'm playing. Say that loosely.
Well, we played for the same grassroots clubs and that. We played obviously primary school, and then we've been about 25 holidays together. Which obviously is a modern podcast, so we'll not get into that.
It's for another time. Well, let's get into the football then. Let's start at St Mirren, because Stephen Robinson is heading back as manager of Aberdeen. I'll come to you first, Andy. I wonder what kind of reception you think Stephen Robinson is going to get on his return to St Mirren.
I think there must be a sense of you versus him going into this weekend, just given the timing that he's left St Mirren, the predicament they found themselves in before they left, obviously precariously sitting around that 11th spot. And I think a couple of the interviews towards the sort of tail end of his tenure, where he was talking about, desperate to get his key players back. The players that were playing for him at that moment in time weren't doing enough. Desperate in these players. This is comments that he had for quite a lot for Stephen Robinson before he left. So I think there's going to be that extra bit of motivation for the St Mirren players going into the game. And like I says, if it turns into the game that I think it's going to, I think Stephen Robinson's got his stamp on St Mirren. St Mirren still is a squad and not particularly Aberdeen yet, so I fancy St Mirren going into that game.
That's the thing, isn't it, Scott? I mean, those St Mirren players know how to battle, and it kind of doesn't really look like the Aberdeen players do.
No, you just need to look at the Aberdeen's recent away form. It's really, really poor, that performance at Ibrox. For me, as much as Rangers were good on the day, a lot of that you can put down to how poor Aberdeen were. They didn't carry any real threat. They were making changes at half time, and I understand that, because a new manager's come in, he's still trying to find what his best team is for me. But I just don't think, as Andy says, if it turns into the type of game that we expect, I don't think they have the kind of profile of players to go and match St Mirren in that department. And then when you weigh up the fact that a lot of the St Mirren players will have that little individual drive to go and beat Stephen Robinson, obviously leaving him at this time of the season, then I do fancy St Mirren getting into the game. Craig McLeish's young manager trying to stamp his authority on that St Mirren team. Be interesting to see if he does tweak it at all. And that competitive thing, because it's your expander, is always going to be there. But when you look at the nitty-gritty, Aberdeen, they just don't look like scoring goals, especially away from home. And performance level throughout the course of the season has been really, really low. I think that's why they find themselves in this situation. So a huge game this weekend.
Do you expect, Scott, some hostility from the not the Aberdeen fans, the St Mirren fans, with Stephen Robinson coming back? I mean, Andy touched on, he left them mid-season. Do you expect, we were talking yesterday on the podcast about booing and fans booing managers, players, etc. I mean, do we think we'll see that kind of reception for Robinson?
I wouldn't be surprised if there was over the course of the game. I think out with the game, there's a huge admiration for Stephen Robinson, obviously bringing that cup to Paisley earlier on in the season. But I think over the course of 90 minutes, when it is competitive, I think there could be the odd shouting and a few boos around the stadium, but that's just the competitive edge of football. And I think Stephen Robinson would probably expect that, especially now the modern way is to try and put them under as much pressure as possible and make it uncomfortable. So I wouldn't be surprised over the game if there was some boos, but I think if you look at it broadly and away from the game, after the game, there's a huge respect there.
Yeah, and just looking at the league, how it could sit after this weekend. I mean, if Killie and St Mirren both win, then them and Aberdeen are all on 30 points. But Andy, and at that point, I mean, St Mirren, if they get the win, look as if they're on the up. Killie have kind of been doing a bit better recently, been picking up points and getting results. Aberdeen are the kind of one team out of those three that don't seem to be picking up.
No, I mean, I think at this moment in time, if I had to predict anyone to be in that 11th spot at the end of the season, it's Aberdeen. I don't think Aberdeen, like you says, have been a great side throughout the season, But I think arguably they've saved their worst period to maybe the last sort of 6 or 7, 8 weeks. Whereas, like you say, since Neil McCann's came in at Kilmarnock, they've shown that they can get results. Yes, there's an element of inconsistency there, but they've picked up some big results within that. And St Mirren, obviously, under Craig McLeish, he's only been in there 2 games. Obviously, the first game he had was a difficult home fixture against Rangers, but then he goes away to a high-flying Falkirk and gets their first win in a couple of months, where probably nobody really expected it to happen. And like we says, I've said it myself. I don't know if Scott or yourself agrees, but I make St Mirren favourites going into this game this weekend. So if they then pick up 2 wins in a row and make it 6 points, I think that momentum's huge at this stage of the season. I think every club, for probably 3rd place or 4th place down, are going to have blips and inconsistencies throughout the season. But at this stage of the season is where you want to be as close to your best as possible, and you know your best players. You know you can rely on the big games. I don't think Aberdeen know their best team. Stephen Robinson certainly doesn't know the players that he can trust yet. Whereas I think that St Mirren and Kilmarnock, I think, have a much clearer idea, and I think they've shown recently they can get results. Where I don't think Aberdeen have proved that yet.
Stephen Robinson's just waiting until the summer so he can poach all his former players.
I noticed he's already started. He bought the boy Bamona who didn't even play at St Mirren, so that's how much he's trying to get his St Mirren identity into Aberdeen.
But I suppose if they were to end up going down, right, hypothetically, if Aberdeen go down, none of those St Mirren players are going to want to follow him, surely.
No, I'd be very much surprised. And listen,
depends the money they're paying, Andy.
Well, if they're paying the money they're paying now, they probably would go, which is why it's unbelievable the fact they're even down there. The money they're spending on players, the transfer fees that they've bought for players, that I think a lot of people forget. Aberdeen have spent a fair chunk of size of money actually bringing players in for fees. Gave a lot of players 5-year contracts. Obviously, January they tried to get rid of some of the players that they gave 5-year contracts and bring in extra bodies, but it's incredible that a club the size of Aberdeen and the expenditure they've had over the last couple of seasons are finding themselves in the situation they are. But like it says, it wouldn't surprise me one bit if they find themselves in that second bottom spot.
What about St Mirren then, Scott? Because Craig McLeish has done a pretty decent job since taking over till the end of the season. He's been, I suppose, quite bullish about the fact that he feels ready for this job on a permanent basis if it comes his way. But a win against Aberdeen is going to surely up his stock in that regard.
Yeah, I think for Craig McLeish, it's a huge opportunity. Obviously, coming in off the back of Stephen Robinson isn't easy because he's obviously the top 6 finishes consistently over the last few years, and then to obviously follow that with a cup win. So for Craig McLeish, it's how he can then be different at the same time from what Stephen Robinson was, because listen, you've heard many people speak about obviously the style of play that St Mirren have had. At the same time, Stephen Robinson St Mirren was successful with. So from Craig McLeish's point of view, he has to win games, but in that short spell, can you see signs of what he would look to then maybe bring to St Mirren?
Well, before we finish up, we've got our rapid fire prediction questions. 1 word or as few words as possible, because some of these you kind of can't answer in 1 word. So I'll come to you first, Scott. What tie this weekend do you think is going to be the coupon buster?
Dundee Celtic.
Andy?
Dundee Celtic.
Okay. Scott, where do you think it's going to kick off this weekend?
Ibrox.
Andy?
St Mirren Aberdeen.
And Scott, which team is going to be top of the league on Sunday night?
Hearts.
Who is going to finish this season higher in the league, St Mirren or Aberdeen, Scott?
St Mirren.
Andy?
St Mirren.
And finally, Scott, who is going to be making the headlines this weekend?
Celtic.
Andy?
I agree, but in the spirit I try to be different for the last one, I'm going to go Stephen Robinson.